You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode number 96. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Paula here, and I'm so glad to have you here with me this week. Thank you so much for joining me for this very special topic. It is one of my favorite topics. As you probably know, if you've listened to this podcast before, I love time management, productivity, all things related, and it is with great pleasure that I record this episode for you today. In my personal life, I am getting ready for a trip. When this episode goes live, I will be with my family in California. We'll quite possibly be at Legoland the day this goes live. And as you may have experienced yourself, the week leading up to any type of vacation can be awfully challenging because what happens to me, and maybe this happens to you, is that there are lots of loose ends that you want to tie up before you go. And there's a lot of packing and planning to be done. And all of these things seem to come together when you have little people that you're planning for as well. It doesn't get any easier. And so it's kind of a perfect time to remind myself some of the lessons that I'm going to be sharing today. And also, it's a time to put them into practice. I have also had the absolute pleasure of coaching my clients on time management issues lately. And there is just this enormous sense of relief and satisfaction that I feel when I have the opportunity to work individually with lawyers and in groups, but in particular, when I can see on their face, usually on my Zoom screen, that what we are talking about is resonating, when I can see in their face that they're seeing how they can approach their time management in a way that creates the peace, the calm, the productivity that they are looking for. And so it's that satisfaction and joy that has really inspired me to dive into this topic today and to create this episode for you. So as the title of this podcast suggests, we're going to be talking about your calendar. We're going to get pretty granular in terms of how we think about things. And what I invite you to think about is your week, this particular week, perhaps, if that makes it more real for you. And what we're going to talk about is how to create more peace, more certainty, more calm, and productivity through the way that you manage your time. And the reason that I think this is important is that it's a problem that comes up with a lot of lawyers and, of course, other busy professionals. This idea of having a full plate and feeling sometimes stressed about it, feeling like you are behind, feeling like there's too much to do and too little time, feeling like you get disrupted, feeling like you're always rushed, feeling maybe disorganized. Maybe you reach the point where it feels like there's so much on your calendar that you're absolutely frozen. You feel overwhelmed. And if you feel like this, you're absolutely not alone. Even as a professional coach who spends her time breathing time management strategies, I spend a lot of time in this area. I still find there are moments and periods of my life where I feel overwhelmed. I try not to use that word. I feel busy, again, a word I try not to use, and I need to revisit my own systems to figure out where the problem is and what I need to do to address those problems. And this happens. You run a busy practice. You have multiple sources of work, all of which are competing for your time and focus. Maybe you're in that situation where nobody's ever really taught you how to manage your practice. You've learned through osmosis. You've built yourself up, risen through the ranks. Maybe you're just starting out and it's not clear to you how you would go about running your practice to be efficient, to be productive, and to have that sense of calm that you're looking for. It may also be that you have tried multiple things. You've tried calendaring, you've tried scheduling, and what you've found is that you're so often interrupted that you give up and throw the baby out with the bathwater. So what we are going to focus on is how to help you bring more peace and more structure and more ease and productivity into your calendar. You may find that there are things that you're doing that end up causing more problems. So for example, one of the first things to go sometimes is self-care or exercise or social time. And if you're using that as a strategy in order to get all your work done, then what you might find is that you end up feeling really burnt out. And then the time that you're spending at work, you're there physically, but it gets harder and harder to focus, or you find that you're procrastinating. And so these are some of the challenges that come up if you're not being strategic about how you structure and schedule your time, and if you don't feel like you've got a system that you can fall back on. So what we're trying to do here is to find a different solution, a solution that will work for you, one that is sustainable, one that is manageable, one that creates peace for you and allows you to work with your strengths instead of feeling like you're constantly fighting against yourself. So the way I propose to structure this discussion is to offer you 4 questions. And under each of those questions, we'll have a discussion. And if you can follow along with these questions and think about how they apply to you in your practice, I think that's the way that you're going to get the most out of this podcast episode. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is your current relationship with your calendar? So whatever system you're using right now, maybe you actually have a calendar that you write dates into and events and appointments, or maybe you have a multiple source way of doing things. You might use your inbox to keep track of tasks that you need to do. You might have a task list. You might have a notepad. You might have a calendar, like an Outlook calendar that you're using. You might have calendars that you're sharing with an assistant or your colleagues. I mean, there may be multiple sources that you're using in order to keep track of your schedule. And what I would invite you to do is to think about what your relationship is with your calendar. So if you have no calendaring system, for example, you might think, okay, I'm neglecting that relationship, or I'm trying to avoid it. You might think, I always love comparing your relationship to a thing to your relationship to a person. So for example, if you listen to the time scarcity podcast episode that I released several months ago now, one of the questions there was, if your relationship with time were your relationship with a person, how would you define your relationship? And one of the descriptions that came to mind for me was, I never have enough of you, or you're never there when I need you, or I always think that you're running away. And so if that is your relationship with time, for example, then that will create certain outcomes in your practice. Now, if you look at your calendar, for example, if your relationship is that you avoid calendaring because you don't think it's going to work for you, or if you find that your calendar is yelling at you, I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you put so much in your calendar and maybe it's, you've written things in one color and then another color. So you've got green ink and red ink and maybe some pencil and some black ink in there. And you've got maybe a circle around something and an exclamation point, and the day is just stuffed full of things. And it may be that your calendar is actually yelling at you. I mean, you might feel like you're being abused, not to treat that word lightly, but you might feel like your calendar is almost abusive, right? It's this level of yelling and requiring of you that you just don't even want to go near your calendar. It may be that your calendar is something that is overscheduled, or maybe it's something that you're avoiding. So again, maybe because you just don't even want to have a calendar. So maybe you don't even create one. And so instead of having a place where you can put all of your appointments and activities, you've got nothing at all. And so it's almost like this ghost-like existence. And you just, put your head in the sand and hope that nothing bad happens. And questions you might ask yourself in relationship to your calendar as well is, would you assign this calendar to somebody else? If you've got that calendar that is literally yelling at you with different colored inks and way too many appointments in it, would you ever give this to somebody else? Would you ask your best friend? Would you ask your dearest colleague? Would you ask your assistant to keep those hours? And if the answer to that is no, then it might be a time for you to reconsider the relationship that you have with your calendar. And bear in mind that what you put on your calendar today is in effect what is going to impact you tomorrow. So today is Monday. And so when I look at my calendar for Tuesday, I'm effectively planning for Tuesday's Paula. And I want to make sure that I'm giving her a fighting chance to get at least some of what I've scheduled for her done and to have a certain level of satisfaction and breathing space throughout the day so that she's not completely overwhelmed all of the time. And I'd invite you to think about the same for you. When you look at your calendar, how are you going about scheduling for future you? If you know, for example, that you're going to have a really busy period ahead, maybe you've got a trial that you're preparing for, do you compensate after the trial with some time for rest and recovery? Or do you schedule yourself right back into another intense working situation, whether it's another trial or a court application or a new file or what have you? So that is what I'm thinking about for that first question. And that is what I would invite you to think about is what is your current relationship with your calendar? Now, if your calendar relationship is not one of peace or trust or satisfaction, then you are in the right place. We're going to talk more about how you can go about resolving some of the challenges that you have in your relationship with your calendar, with your scheduling. So once you've defined that relationship, the next question that I invite you to consider is what kind of problems are you having? The more you can define the problems that you face when it comes to time management, the easier it will be for you to solve those problems. So I mentioned before overscheduling. That is a challenge that comes up often in a legal practice because I know you're a busy lawyer. Chances are you wear multiple hats inside your law firm or other organization. You might also have young kids at home, in which case I hear you. It means more on your schedule. It means that you are now managing not just your schedule, but other people's schedules. You may have a team whose schedule you are somewhat managing. You may have different projects on the go. So you want to think about if that is a problem for you, if overscheduling is a problem, then that's going to open up a possibility of solutions that are based on taking things off of your calendar and putting them somewhere else. If procrastination is a challenge for you, then we want to figure out what it is that is causing you to procrastinate. Sometimes the procrastination might be that there's work to do in terms of figuring out how you're going to overcome the challenge of task initiation. And if you are a regular listener of this podcast, then you know that I did a series on time management and executive functioning not that long ago. So you can go back to the episode that I did about task initiation. I believe it's episode number 2 of that series. And what you will find is that there are tips and tricks that you can use to initiate a task if procrastination is something that is just innately challenging for you. That being said, procrastination often comes with something else attached to it. Sometimes the reason that you're procrastinating is that you are overwhelmed and perhaps a little bit burned out. You may be experiencing a period in your practice where you are really overscheduled, you're really tired, and so it's increasingly challenging to get started on tasks because your work days are so long. So think about what it is that is causing you to procrastinate. Maybe it's the nature of your work. Maybe you're doing tasks that you no longer enjoy doing. Maybe you have repetitive tasks. Maybe the tasks are too challenging and you feel unsupported. Maybe you're concerned about the outcome of your work product. So there can be a lot of reasons why you might be procrastinating on something. And so before you automatically beat yourself up and think that there's something that is inherently wrong with you and the way that you're managing your time, I invite you to get really clear on what types of situations lead to procrastination and to start brainstorming about how you might overcome that. Other challenges that you might have are missing things. Sometimes you might find that you reach a point where you are missing deadlines, you miss appointments that you've scheduled with people. So it may be that that is a challenge that you're having in your scheduling. You don't have a place for all the information to go on your calendar. You might find that you are having challenges with all or nothing thinking. You might create a calendar, you might set it up, you might get started on it, everything's going great, and then you have an email. And the email requests that you do something immediately, and your whole schedule for the day gets thrown off. And instead of recalibrating, you just decide, there really is no point in wasting my time setting up this calendar system because I'm just going to have to deviate from it anyways. And so you throw the baby out with the bathwater and there you are with no schedule. It may also be that there are certain elements of your practice that are particularly challenging. And I just mentioned email. That could be one of them. You may find that keeping track of your email is hard. I know there are a lot of time management experts out there who talk about doing your emails at certain points of the day, and that will work for some of you, depending on the nature of your practice. But if you feel like you need to check in with your emails more regularly than, let's say, once in the morning and once in the evening and once at lunchtime, then you'll need to find a way to manage your relationship with your emails so that you're on top of them, you're seeing anything urgent that comes in, and you're responding to anything that requires an immediate response, but you're not necessarily so attached to your email that you're not able to focus on tasks throughout the day. So these are all some of the challenges that you might be facing in your practice. And what I invite you to consider is, what are the problems that you're having, these problems potentially, other problems that you might be having, and to make a list of those problems so that you know exactly what they are. So that's question 2. Question 1 was, what is your current relationship with your calendar? Number 2 is, what problems are you currently facing? And question 3 is, what would be different for you if you solved these problems? So imagine if, instead of having a calendar that was completely overscheduled, where you felt like there was absolutely no chance that you were going to get things done, what if you had a calendar where you knew exactly what needed to be done? You had a repository, maybe it's a file list or some other document where you knew all of your action items. But when you looked at your calendar, what you had to do for the day, what you had to do for the week, you felt confident that you could get most, if not all, of those tasks complete. If the challenge for you is email, and right now you feel like you are at the beck and call of your inbox, what if you could feel like you were the one who was in control and that you decided when you went into your inbox, you had a system for processing emails so that you weren't simply reacting and interrupting your day when a new email came in, and instead you had a way of keeping tabs on your email, knowing what was happening, and yet being in control of when and how you respond to those emails. If your problem was procrastination, maybe can you imagine what that would be like if you manage your procrastination so that you knew that if you had items that were scheduled on your calendar, that you would be able to initiate those tasks, you would be able to accomplish them, and that you could move on to the next task feeling accomplished and peaceful. Imagine how that would feel. And what are some of the emotions that come to your mind if you put yourself in that position? If you imagine that all those problems are solved, what are some of the dominant emotions that you think you would feel in that situation? And if I think of the transformations, for example, that clients have experienced when they have reached a resolution, they've come to solutions, they feel more in control of their inbox, of their time, of their practice, some of the words that come to mind are peace. That peace of knowing that everything's under control, that you have the time that you need, that you're able to manage, and whatever comes your way, you'll figure out a plan to resolve it. You might feel a sense of ease. So yes, your job is challenging and the matters that you're dealing with can be very complex, but you have the ease of knowing that no matter what happens, you've got a system. You've got a way of making sure that things are going to get done. You may feel confident knowing that if something is on your calendar, it is as good as done. Instead of feeling like you might procrastinate or push it off or waste time, you know that when that item appears, if you've got it scheduled for Tuesday morning, it's going to get done on Tuesday morning. And if for some reason it gets pushed back, you have a way of dealing with it so that you're not scrambling to get things done last minute. You'll also feel like you can trust yourself and that other people can trust you. To me, time management is one of the ways that you can establish trust with others and with yourself. It's an easy way, again, not necessarily simple, but it's an easy way to gain trust of others. It's also an easy way to lose trust with others. So if you commit to a deadline, whether it's to yourself or whether it's to somebody else, and you follow through, you're adding a point of purchase. You're sending a signal that when you say that you're going to do something, you are going to do it when you say you're going to do it, to yourself and to others. And when you don't follow through on those deadlines, you're sending yourself and others the same signal. And so what I love about time management is that it's a way of building trust. It's a way of accountability, and it's a way of really creating a practice that you feel good about. One where you are productive, one where you're being intentional about what it is that you're putting on your calendar. You're being intentional about what you're not putting on your calendar, and putting onto your calendar things that may not be necessarily in your practice, but self-care, social time, exercise, downtime, vacations, all the things that help you, that help sustain you as a professional so that you can do your work to your highest potential. And I believe I talked about it on the podcast before. I know I had an episode where I interviewed Mylène Oudmorency. She's a professional organizer, and she talked about filling your cup first. She used this beautiful analogy of a tower of champagne flutes where you want to pour the champagne into that top glass, and then the champagne trickles over and it fills all the remaining glasses. You may also have heard the analogy that is used on airplanes. You want to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can help others. And when it comes to your calendar, you want to take that same approach. You want to make sure that you are taking care of yourself so that you can take care of everybody else. And yes, I know that there will be times on your calendar where self-care is not going to be able to take that front seat, that you're going to have to maybe put it to the side for maybe a day, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks, depending on the nature of the work that you're doing or certain things that are happening outside of your professional work that are happening in your personal life that are requiring extra attention. And if that is required, then what I encourage you to do is to make sure that as much as possible, you build little pockets of self-care into those days. And when that intense period has subsided, that you give yourself the rest and recovery time that you need. So that was the third question, is what would be different for you if you were able to resolve the problems that you identified in question 2, and really allow yourself to go there and imagine what it would be like for you. Because I'm going to ask you to draw from that energy in responding to question 4. And question 4 is to ask yourself, what solutions or strategies will work best for you to overcome the challenges that you identified in question 2? And so when you think about the solutions, when you think about the solution to procrastination, for example, if you're coming there from a place of confidence and calm, what types of ideas might you come up with that would help you to overcome procrastination? If you imagine yourself in that version of you, the version of you that doesn't procrastinate, how does she deal with a situation where, let's say, she needs to write a brief and she doesn't want to do it? She sits down at her computer and all of a sudden feels the urge to go get a snack, grab a coffee, get on the internet, answer some emails. What does she do in that moment? You're going to want to channel that version of yourself who has solved the problem to see what answers she has for you. And what I'm going to do here is offer you some ideas, some strategies that you might use when you find yourself in one of these challenging situations. And these are strategies that I have offered to clients that have been helpful for them. These are strategies that I use in my practice. And so I'd invite you to think about how they resonate with you, but don't limit yourself. Use your own creativity. You know best what systems and strategies will work for you. And so I encourage you to draw from your own wisdom and draw from your own experience to design a time management strategy, to design a calendar system that aligns with you, that will work for you. So here are some ideas. One strategy that I absolutely love is anchoring. Now, anchors are basically using events that happen in your day, no matter what, to create some structure around your day and to create some structure around your week. So, for example, anchors might be your lunch break. They are when you arrive at the office. They are when you leave the office. If you routinely have an afternoon snack or walk around the block, that would be an anchor. And the reason you want to focus on anchors is that they break up your day. I was recently listening to a podcast episode where the podcaster was talking about their son who was finishing up university this year or next year, and after that would have the rest of their life. And I thought, ooh, when you finish university, chances are you're in your early 20s, and the rest of your life can be pretty long. I mean, that could be 80 plus years, depending on how long you live. And up until that point, if you're in school, chances are there's structures, right? You do preschool, daycare, kindergarten, grade school, high school, university, college, whatever, and everything has a certain structure to it. And to think of the rest of your life as this totally unstructured time feels, on the one hand, liberating, but it could also feel overwhelming. And I think the same holds true for your days. If you go into your workday and you sit at your desk and it's 8 o'clock and you're going to leave your desk at 5 o'clock and you think, this is great, I've got the whole day ahead of me, and you don't have a plan, then it can be really hard to navigate what you're going to do during the day. Versus if you sit at your desk and it's 8 o'clock and you think, okay, I am going to take a break at noon for my lunch. That'll be about an hour. I'm going to take an afternoon break from 2 to 2:30. I'm going to leave the office at 5:30. And actually, you know what? I'm going to have a little mid-morning pick-me-up because I know that I get a bit slumpish at 10 o'clock. Then all of a sudden, your day is broken up into roughly 2-hour chunks. And when you have 2-hour chunks, then you can take those chunks and you can look at your to-do list and you can think to yourself, now what activities are going to fit best into these chunks? And one of the best things about this is that you're no longer looking at this vast expanse of time where you think to yourself, oh dear, what am I going to do with myself all day? That I find is when you start getting wasteful, where you start drifting, where it's hard to focus because it feels like it's such a long day. And the motivation doesn't really kick in until about 3 o'clock when you think, yikes, it's almost 5 o'clock and I haven't started. I've got 2 hours to get my work done. That would be even more painful if you were billing for your time, if you had to record your hours and realized you got to 3 o'clock without any billable work. So putting some scaffolding, putting some anchors into your day is one way of making your day feel less overwhelming and to start building some structure and some time blocks into your day naturally. Now, you don't have to stop at your day. You can also do that looking at your week. So, for example, if you've got classes that you take routinely, if you've got meetings that take place weekly, if you've got other events that happen on a weekly schedule, that's really great because that is going to inform the cadence of your week. For me, for example, my podcast episode deadline is Wednesdays. And so I know that I need to plan that into my calendar because I know that's something that's going to happen on that day. I have meetings scheduled that fall on regular days of the work week. So I know to build my schedule around those days. So I will structure my days, the cadence of the week, based on what I know to be regular features within each week. For you, it might be classes. It might be your workout routine. It might be your babysitting schedule. It might be your parenting schedule. I mean, there's all these different factors that might come into play that will help inform you of what days you're going to do certain things. Back before I had children, I used to have, and actually even after I had children, was still working in an office, I used to have days that were designated long work days. And so on Fridays, for example, I wouldn't have necessarily a set go home time. I would use that day to take care of any odds and ends that I wasn't able to get to during the week. So that gave me flexibility and a bit of freedom during the week to know that if there were tasks that could wait until Friday, that I'd have a window of time to deal with them. So I'd encourage you to think about your own week and think about where you have flexibility, where you have deadlines, where you have meetings or other things that are already anchored into your schedule, and to use that when you're scheduling your week to break things up. Now, another consideration, and again, you may have heard me say this on the podcast before, but I can't emphasize it enough, is to think about your energy levels and when you have the best mental focus. For me, I've mentioned this before, it's first thing in the morning. And so I like to front load my mornings. I used to use the evening period to do work. So after the kids were in bed, I'd open up my laptop and try to do work. What I found was that I would take really long to do things. I was easily distracted. I'd often go to the not the snack room because I don't have one of those in my house, but I'd go to the kitchen, get something sweet to keep my energy levels up. It would be really challenging. And then I'd go to bed late. I'd wake up tired, and it had this perpetuating cycle of not really getting work done. And the reason I liked the evenings was because I felt like it was open-ended, that I would have all the time that I needed to complete a task. And what I ended up doing was moving my window to the morning, to very early in the morning, usually starting around 6:30, giving myself about an hour, sometimes an hour and a half before I need to do anything in my house. I'm thinking of the weekdays when the kids go to school and I have a routine that I need to follow to keep them fed and on time and all that. And what I found was that by moving my evening work zone into the morning is I now had an anchor. I had to stop that work at 7:30 usually. So I now had a little bit of pressure to actually get things done. If I started working at 6:30 or 6, that I would have pressure to get things done. And that is motivating. I also found that because I was more alert, I'd get things done faster. I'd think faster. I'd make decisions more quickly and rationally. And so I'd invite you to think about playing with the time that you have and the pockets that you have. This may be even more doable if you are in a hybrid situation. If you can work from home, if you can work from the office, you might find that you're able to squeeze in little pockets here and there that add to your overall efficiency without having a huge footprint on other aspects of your life. So that is under the rubric of energy. So think about when you have your best energy, how you might leverage that. So think about, if it's drafting that requires your mental focus, then maybe that goes first thing in the morning. If it's the afternoon that works for you, then maybe you do that. Maybe you find a time in the afternoon where you're less prone to interruption and you block off a time to do your drafting. If you find that you start to fade a little bit in the afternoon, you might put a walk in there or some other way of getting your energy back up. You might schedule more meetings and appointments and situations where you're going to be face to face with people. I find sometimes that can help raise your energy levels. So you're going to just want to think about what are your energy levels and how can you best implement those into the structure of your day. Other strategies that you might think about, hybrid. If you are working in a hybrid environment and you're at home some days and you're at the office some days, what I'd encourage you to do is to think quite differently about those two different environments and how you're going to structure your days accordingly. So for example, if work at home days are better overall for drafting and focus assignments, then assign yourself the work those days that you're going to be at home. And then for the days you're going to be in the office, maybe those are days where it's more focused on social. Maybe it's meetings. Maybe it's catching up with colleagues on particular files. Maybe it's scheduling client meetings. And so I'd invite you to think about how you're going to structure each of those days. They might look different. I recently did an exercise with a client where we designed the perfect hybrid work day. So working from home, the perfect day working from the office. And then from there, you can start thinking about how you would most effectively structure your days. And just going back to what I was talking about before in terms of anchors and predictability, you may have days that are predictably maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday are your office days. Tuesday, Thursdays are your at-home days, vice versa, or some other system. But knowing where you're going to be and then planning your schedule around that will allow you to be most efficient when it comes to scheduling your time. Now, I haven't mentioned it, but it kind of goes without saying, give yourself time to schedule your time. This can be counterintuitive and difficult to get started on if you haven't already because of some of the incentives that might work. If you're on a billable system and you don't get recognized for the time that you spend planning out your calendar, you may feel unmotivated to do it. However, I highly encourage it because it will give you that peace, that calm, that knowing that you've had a look at your week, you've had a look at your schedule, you know where things are going to go, you've structured your days in the most efficient way possible. And so please develop some sort of a practice, whether it means that you are scheduling every week, which I highly recommend, Sunday night, Monday morning. Look at your calendar, give yourself a rough outline of what you want to do. And then each day, each morning, think about what you have on task for that day. And as you wrap up, that's a great time to make note of any tasks that didn't get finished that day that you want to move to the following day or some other time during the week. And again, the next morning, you'll want to revisit your list. So these are all ideas in terms of how you can best structure your time. Think about what systems work best for you. If you're a paper person, do you have paper handy? Do you have a calendar handy? Do you have a notebook, an agenda that you can use to structure your time? If you're an electronic person and you like things to be digital, do you have the systems that you need? Do you have the support that you need? Do you have people to whom you can delegate? Do you have people who can help keep you accountable? Do you want to work with a coach, somebody who can help you design a system for you so that you can then follow that system? So these are all ideas. These are all strategies. But again, let's take it back to the original question, which is when you are thinking from your most kind of elevated self, when you're thinking from that place where you have the system that you want, where you can imagine yourself feeling calm, feeling peaceful, feeling productive, what are the solutions that are going to work best for you and create those systems and try to implement them, see how they go. If they need to be adjusted, you can go and adjust them. And a great place to start here is to think about what already works for you. If you already have scaffolding in place, great. If you already have a calendar in place and it's working for you, great. Start there and build, because the practice that you have is going to continue to evolve. The systems that you have are going to continue to evolve. And one of the most important things is to keep track, to keep your attention on your practice so that you see when you need to recalibrate. You feel when you're a little bit out of sorts and you need to make an adjustment, and then you can move from there. So the reason that these questions are so powerful is that they require you to focus your attention on your calendar. They require you to focus your attention on what isn't working and to develop strategies to solve those problems. The skills you'll need to implement these strategies, to answer these questions, you'll need to set aside the time to do the scheduling. You'll need to pay attention. You're going to have to give your focus to what works and what doesn't work. You're also going to need to be gracious with yourself. You're going to need to be kind to yourself when you're creating your calendar, when you're evaluating your performance. If you procrastinate, be kind to yourself. Be curious. What was it about that situation that led to the procrastination? And then solve for that. If you ask yourself these questions, if you answer these questions and truly go about implementing new systems, what you'll find is that you will create more peace, more productivity, more calm, and you'll create more certainty through your calendar. Now, that is what I have to offer for you today, and it has been such a joy to chat with you about time management. I have a number of podcast episodes that are all about time management, procrastination, time scarcity, executive functioning, and so we will link to those episodes in the show notes so that you can see and listen to those episodes if you like this topic and you would like to learn more. And I would invite you to just think about your weeks going forward as opportunities to create the practice that you want, to move away from that reactive state into a creative state. And if you need help with that, by all means, please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any questions, send me an email, ask me on LinkedIn. I would absolutely love to hear from you, and I would love the opportunity to support you. So with that, my friend, thank you so much for joining me. I will very much look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care and have a wonderful, peaceful, calm, and productive week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.